Hello and welcome to this November Cool edition, where we'll try to give an overview of open source software license compliance approaches and different certificates that are around. In particular, we'll look at the OSADL policy template, the OSADL supplier and the OSADL license compliance audit, the SLCA and the LCA, and also give a quick introduction to OpenChain, where you'll hear more about in the second part of this lecture. So let's get started right away with the OSADL open source policy template. If you've been to Cool before or even to any other OSADL lecture, you might have heard of this before. So today we'll keep it very, very short. If you're interested in the policy, in the presentation of the policy in more detail, you're welcome to look back at some of the older Cool editions or write to us as well. But here we'll just do a very brief overview. So as a basis for license compliance, it has been established for a while now that it is required to have an open source policy. Of course, the main goal of such a policy is to avoid copyright infringement. And to achieve that goal, processes have to be created within a company, have to be maintained within a company. And this can only be done successfully if a sufficient understanding of the related concept is also established. So that's also a goal of a policy. Last but not even last, but one of the other points, one of the other aspects is to provide control over licensing of a company's own IP. The keyword here is contribution policy, and also this is an aspect that becomes more and more important to meet customer requirements. All of this is the aim of an open source policy, and to further this aim or to help you achieve these goals, OSADL has created the open source or an open source policy template. And the basic idea of this template is that different companies take different approaches to license compliance, depending, for example, on the way they're organized, maybe on their size, on the product they're making as well. And of course, a particular company policy, be it a FOSS policy or really any other policy as well, must reflect these differences. Now, we have on the one hand that creating a policy requires a certain understanding of the concept and expertise in the subject, but using a policy requires it to be brief, specific, and to the point, so that it's actually that it's possible to handle it in everyday work. And these two requirements are taken into account by the OSADL open source policy template in the way that it is structured. So this structure consists of, first of all, various chapters. That's the main part of the policy. So various chapters with template text as basis for an individual company policy. Then in between those chapters, there are motivations, as these orange boxes, motivations, explanations for the person who creates the policy. And in case there are options, so there's different ways of handling a situation, of interpreting a license, for example, then these options are given and can be chosen. There's some text blocks in case contracts or other documents need to be modified. So we have templates, suggestions for that in little gray boxes. There are placeholders to be filled out directly within the policy if the document is used immediately. And then there's some additional information to keep this main part of the policy short and to the point. We provide also some annexes that have forms on processes and legal information and so on. And then supplements which give deeper insight, which can be used for training or for deeper reading on technical, legal, practical backgrounds on all kinds of subjects, from copyright law to technical issues to legal issues that are looked at in depth in these supplements. Now, the content of the policy itself can be very well presented by looking at software flow through a company. So if you take a bird's view on a company and see how software moves, you have, on the one hand, you have incoming software. So may it be downloaded from online repositories by an employee, created by freelancers, maybe by trainees, by software providers, even by hardware providers. Nowadays, hardware usually contains software. So this is software coming into the company. There's different departments have to deal with this. Then you have development within the company. So own development, this point is pretty clear. And then of course there is delivery of the software. So outgoing software, be it electronically, be it installed on hardware, on a medium, or via the internet, and again different departments that are involved with that. And the idea of a policy is to create input and output gateways to make sure that there are processes to make sure everything that comes into the company is clean and can be used in the intended way, and everything that goes out of the company leaves the company in a license compliant way with all the required license material. And this is what the goal of the policy is. And then there's again different responsibilities attached to different tasks here. And taking this image gives a pretty good starting point of what the different chapters of the policy are. We have, first of all, responsibilities. Who does what and what do they do? Then there's third-party software. One of the main parts of this policy is how to handle third-party software, be it with an approval process, approval request, repository check-in. So how do we find out what software is used? How do we find out what licenses are involved? This is all in under the heading of third-party software. Then there's of course creating and delivering FOSS license information, so different use cases of delivering software, different licenses. So here we have all the license obligations and use cases that fall under this chapter. And then of course there is development within the company. This might be touched by open source software in case contribution takes place, contribution to an open source software, and for this we'll need a contribution policy. So this as a short overview of the OSADL open source policy. There's some additional topics that are not shown in this bird's view image. Communication of the policy within the company, training of employees, selecting a suitable license for own FOSS projects. So this is is part of contribution, but a few steps further. Audits and certifications, something we'll hear more about today, and patent considerations as well. I've mentioned before there are supplements with background information, with training material, with reading material. These can be used as separate documents or as part of the policies. They are among others on derivative work, copyleft, license compatibility, software scanning, rebuilding. So all these topics that pop up again and again when using open source software. The open source software is available as PDF files from OSADL directly. You can just write to us at info@osadl.org to obtain these documents. For those who would like a plain text version, it is also available on GitHub, OSADL FOSS policy template. And at the end of this year, we'll expect a new version of the policy with some additional use cases, with some additional supplements, and a few minor changes on the existing document as well. Just a quick view what the policy document itself actually looks like. So here we have the document with the explanation boxes, and of course the chapter on audits and certification. So you can see there's some introduction, there's some motivation, the responsibilities are set forth for particular tasks, for items, and this can then be used within the company or adapted to the company's requirements. So much on the policy. I promised I'll keep it short this time so that we have some time to look into some of the other aspects of license conformance and in particular certification. First of all, we'll have a look at the OSADL license compliance audit, the LCA. The LCA is a product audit, so it looks at one particular product. And the idea is to support a company with organizing their license compliant distribution of one particular product. In particular, we're looking here at Linux-based embedded systems, as of course that is the hard core of most of our member companies distribute Linux-based embedded system. And to keep the audit fairly general, to make sure that the same audit procedure can be used on many different companies, we are concentrating on this audit on the Linux kernel under the GPL2 and the C library, usually if it's the glibc under the LGPL 2.1. Also, these two licenses are some of the strictest licenses that we encounter in projects, and when it is made sure that the license obligations for these licenses are fulfilled, it is fairly certain that the license obligation for all other licenses can also be fulfilled by using the same processes. And I'm saying it is a product audit, and that is true. One product is audited, but it is a particular emphasis is set on the company processes that have led to the license compliant treatment of this particular product. So although it is a product audit, also company processes are being looked at and evaluated. So the procedure of the LCA is usually that a lawyer and a technical expert come into the company for a day. They get presented. We've done it online as well in the last 2 years, but usually they come to the company. They get presented with the product in the same way as it would be delivered to the customer, and then the LGPL, GPL license obligations are checked. That, among others, includes information obligations and distribution obligations. So I say among others, these are the headlines, and then of course the detailed obligations are being checked in particular. So information obligation, distribution obligation, meaning are license text delivered, are copyright notices delivered, is a warranty disclaimer delivered, is the source code delivered, is it a complete corresponding source code, can it be rebuilt, all these points that the GPL and the LGPL require. Then, of course, license obligations for modified software are being handled. In particular, are there any modifications to the software? Are these licensed correctly? If, for example, it was contributions to the Linux kernel. Then accompanying documents are checked, meaning is FOSS accounted for in additional contracts, for example, terms of use, and so on. Then the special obligations of the LGPL. Here we're talking, of course, about the requirement to allow re-engineering and modifications of a linked proprietary application if it is linked with the glibc. And we have the point of TiVoization. So is it possible to reinstall modified versions of the GPL license software on this device? Or is there a way to make it possible for the recipient of the system? And when all of these points have been checked, a report is created with the results, and it also contains hints to possible faults. So this report is very clearly structured. It looks at every single license obligation. So the heading is the license obligation, gives the result of the audit for this product in case there were any faults. It gives the causes for these faults. It gives hints on how they can be eliminated. It can also give hints on possible improvements, which are not necessary but could be recommended. And a conclusion is given. This is done for every single license obligation. You can find such an audit report, of course, anonymized, which didn't go so well, to be honest. So we have a few that went a lot better, but you can find one at the OSADL website at Legal Assessments if you're logged in with the OSADL member login. If no faults were found, or if they have been corrected and a re-audit has been done, then a certificate is issued and the product and buyers can be sure that this product is brought into the market in a license compliant way. So much for the LCA. Now we'll take a look at the supplier license compliance audit, the SLCA. This is in comparison to the LCA, which is a product audit, the SLCA is a process audit. So let's see what the supplier license compliance audit is all about. It is a questionnaire which you can access at fos-slca.org with this username and the given password here, and you can find a survey there that you can fill out, and then your process compliance is evaluated here. This is what the questions look like, and to show you how this works in general, we'll go through it. You can see there's quite a large number of questions. We'll pick one of these questions and fill out the questionnaire for this particular question. All right, so we'll have a look at the questions on organization, internal organization, on roles, on responsibilities. They go into some processes that have to be established for a company to ensure FOSS compliance. The first question: have you defined a process that is designed to ensure FOSS license compliance? Of course we have, otherwise we wouldn't even have started doing this questionnaire. So we'll select yes here and see that a number of other questions open up. Are the processes available in form of a document? Yes, they are, in form of the OSADL policy template, which you can then upload here to provide to the auditor. Do the processes apply to one of the following answers? The process apply to everyone in the company involved in software development, particular departments of the company other than software development, and we have software development and other departments handled individual, and we'll pick the handled individual here. So these are just some exemplary answers. They won't make that are, for example, based on the idea of the policy. Of course, they can be different if you do this survey. So we'll have other process based on a hierarchy. We'll assume yes, we have some hierarchy. There's an open source compliance officer. There might be the legal department involved as well. Which department does the group of persons work in? So we have, of course, the legal department. Might have someone from the development department. There might be others as well. Is there a description of the role for each of these persons responsible for FOSS compliance, describing their tasks? Of course there is. That is the chapter on responsibility in the open source policy, so this can be uploaded here again. We have if the person is making the final decisions about which FOSS can be used in software solution products. And here, yes, they might have been delegated to make this decision. So yes, also under the conditions under which the FOSS can be used. So here we'll have someone from the legal department. So this can also be checked. Persons making final decisions, were they hired specifically to oversee FOSS compliance? This is fairly individual. Whom do the persons making final decisions regarding FOSS compliance use report to? Well, this depends a lot on the company. Of course, it might be the legal department has the final decision. It might be management that has the final decision. So we'll go for management here. In the end, they always have the final decisions after all. Now, do the persons making the final decisions in your company get regular training? Of course, they get regular training. How often? Well, this depends on the different situations as well. We'll say maybe twice a year. They go to workshops or take part in OSADL trainings twice a year. Okay, twice a year. Where does the expertise of the person leading such trainings results on? Could be that they're simply OSADL employees, or could of course be other workshops as well. Let's make it easy here. Do you employ an external lawyer for advice on FOSS compliance? Depending on the company size, they might have a very well-versed own internal legal department, but often I think, especially for smaller companies, they might have external legal advice or even external legal advice through OSADL. Are your employees allowed to give feedback relating to these processes? So we'll assume here that they are allowed to give feedback on decision-making process, on decision and on conditions. Of course, it's always useful to get in feedback. Are there standard procedures? Well, in this case, we don't have standard procedures established. Could be possible. And then how can feedback be given? If it is not a formal procedure, then maybe just per email. So this is more or less how you would fill out this questionnaire. Then you can go through all the questions and even in between save the answers, and in the end then send the answers off and get them also for your internal review. So just to give you an idea of how what kind of questions you can expect here and how this survey works exactly. So this is how the questionnaire can be filled out to see if a company is compliant with or has the required processes established to be license compliant with the most commonly used FOSS licenses. Here we have another overview over the different topics. I won't go deeply into that. So there's some preparation and question, use case scenarios. Then we have questions on organization of FOSS compliance, on participation, collaboration in FOSS projects, how to handle incoming codes. You can see a lot of these points that are talked about here you might recognize from the open source policy, even from the LCA. Here, license obligations, of course, these are the same license obligations that are being checked for in the LCA. Handling copyleft licenses, license compatibility in particular, also a point in the open source policy. And of course, that is a mapping that should work well. Now, a little bit on the history of the supplier license compliant audit. You see these. You just saw this very fluent change into the open chain ISO standard, because the SLCA is historically was developed at OSADL and then went over to the Linux Foundation, and this is what the Open Chain project was based on when it first started. So the questionnaire, the first SLCA questionnaire, is still quite similar to some of the Open Chain specification that we'll have today. I won't talk much about Open Chain, as you'll hear a lot about that from Nicole Papler in the second lecture today, but let me just give a few words on the motivation here. Why is supplier compliance an issue at all? Well, we have a supply chain for almost every product nowadays, and for software also additions are being made. So we'll start with a Linux developer who writes the Linux kernel, and then we'll get a chip manufacturer who adds a few lines to the Linux kernel, uses the rest of it. Same for the board manufacturer, he uses what they get from the chip manufacturer, add to it, and so on until you get to the end user who doesn't create anything new but only uses what they are given. Now, how does licensing work in such a case? Because of course every creator is the copyright holder to their own creation. So what does that have to do with licensing? So if we look at this software trade chain, we have two different aspects. Let's say we have licensing. So the Linux developer licenses their work to the chip manufacturer in this example, and the chip manufacturer licenses their contribution, only their contribution, to the next in line, to the board manufacturer. But the chip manufacturer does not license the complete Linux kernel to the board manufacturer, because of course they don't hold the rights in this part, but they get the license directly from the original creators. So this licensing has to be done correctly, and this we call this is licensing, and we call this enabling what the chip manufacturer does. So the chip manufacturer enables the board manufacturer to receive a license directly from the Linux developer, and that's why it's so important, for example, to deliver the license texts along, to deliver copyright notices, and all these, the warranty disclaimer in particular. So the chip manufacturer gives the board manufacturer the software and all the information required so that the board manufacturer can then again get a license for this part from the original creator. So we call this licensing, and we call this enabling. And if this licensing and the enabling is not done correctly, then the first license here becomes invalid, and the chip manufacturer is no longer allowed to give software down the supply chain. And of course this goes on and on and on, and here we have the problem. So if one of these steps is invalid, then of course the next one can heal it again, but it'll be a lot more work to heal something that and sometimes if this licensing is not done correctly, then maybe a healing is not even possible. So if we look at the whole concept, then you'll see it can get quite complicated, and everyone licenses their own part and enables the downstream users to receive a license from the original creators. And of course there needs to be a certain trust, so that even the last part in this chain, the one before the last part in this chain, can be sure that they can give the software in a license compliant way to the end user when all the license obligations before have been fulfilled. So this software trade chain is then converted, or the idea of Open Chain is to convert the software trade chain into a chain of trust for FOSS compliance. You can find information on the OpenChain project on openchainproject.org. OpenChain provides the compliance specification first and foremost, so the specifications that have now also turned into an ISO standard last year. There is additional training material, very nice training material actually. They also provide a policy template, a more compact policy template. And it is possible to do a self-certification for OpenChain compliance or even third-party certification, but we'll hear a lot more on this in the next talk. Thank you.